Eruvin Daf Tzadik Beis. Today's email comes to us from Lauren Spiegelman from Ramat Shemesh. She writes, I know you haven't seen or heard from me in a long time, which is true. I'm still in the shir, but over Yantav, I fell a bit behind. I know your sheet is to jump right back into wherever the daf is holding and make up the missing daf from another time, but I really feel that the continuity is important for our understanding, and that if I come back to those missing dafim later when I'm not in the sukkah anymore, it will be too hard. So after sukkahs, I picked up again on YouTube where I left off. Basically, he's saying that from today on, he gets up at 6:30, especially early, so he can do 2 daf a day. Be'ezer Hashem, when it comes to the end of Eruvin, he'll make a scene with everybody else and then jump right back on the bandwagon. Whatever works for each person. You should have a tremendous hatzlacha, Lauren. Hope to see you soon. We're continuing with yesterday's sugya. We had the 3 machlokes. Rabbi Yochanan passes like Rabbi Shimon, that the outdoor spaces of Gag, Chatz, or Karfaf are all considered one. You can go from one to the other. Not only that, says Rabbi Yochanan, even if one of the people made a eruv that allows him to take things out of his house into the Chatz, we're not concerned that those things are going to end up in someone else's Chatz. Now we have to explain the famous mission that we learned a number of times. If there's a wall that divides 2 chatzeros, it's 4 tefachim wide, 10 tefachim tall, it's a reshus b'fnei atzma, it's its own domain. The Mishnah says that you could eat the fruit, go up onto the wall, eat the fruit, each one from each side, ubelvad shelo yeridu lamata. As long as you don't take the fruit off the wall and bring it down to the chutzner, it seems like. Now, according to Rabbi Shimon, that shouldn't be a problem. It's like taking something from a rooftop to a chutzner, which is allowed. Rabbi Shimon is going to have to explain the Mishnah. Ubelvad shelo yeridu lamata means as long as you don't take the fruit from the wall and bring it into your house. That's awesome. Just like it's also to go from your house to another chutzner, it's also also to go from another chutzner in reverse to your house. Although there's a brisa from Rabbi Chia, the famous Rabbi Chia who wrote the brises together with Shaya, they have beautiful, perfect brises. And in the brisa it says, a person should not stand there in the chutzner and eat, rather he should be on top of the wall and eat. Mashma, not like Rabbi Shimon, that the issue is not bringing it into the house, rather the issue is taking the fruit off the wall into the chutzner. Gemara says, you're right, that's Rabbi Chia. But Rabbi Yochanan is mecholek on Rabbi Chia. In fact, Rebbe himself, who wrote the Mishnah, didn't write what Rabbi Chia wrote. There's a case of 2 chatzeros, and in the center there's a churva, there's a ruin. There's a chatzer on each side of the ruin. So we have a machlokes. Rav Huna, who's a Talmud of Rav, held like Rav, that in this particular case, one chatzer made an eruv and the other chatzer didn't make an eruv. And Rav holds that making an eruv creates an issue because you'll become accustomed to bringing things out of your house. And from out of your house, the chutzner, you might come to another chutzner. So here as well, the one chutzner that made an eruv, they're not allowed to carry to the churva. The chutzner that didn't make an eruv is allowed to carry to the churva. Chia bar Rav, Chia, the son of Rav himself, says, I heard from my father Rav that they're both equal. The Gemara has a suffix. Did he mean they're both equal, that you cannot carry from either one of them to the churva? And that would make a lot of sense, since you can't carry from one that made an eruv. So when they're both equal, that means even the one that didn't make an eruv is also also to carry. Or perhaps no, they're both mutter. Why would both of them be mutter? Rav says that you cannot carry from a place that you make an eruv. That's in a typical case. But now we're talking about a churva. And in a churva, no one leaves things in a churva. It's not a place that's protected. And therefore there's no concern that you might bring something from your house into the churva and to another chutzner. Brand new Mishnah. If you have a rooftop that's wide and leads into a rooftop that's narrow, the rooftop that's wide rules over the rooftop that's narrow, and therefore the person can carry stuff from his house to his rooftop, and we don't care about the smaller portion of the roof. It's considered part of the larger roof, and we view the indentation as a doorway into the smaller roof. But if you're standing in the vantage point of the smaller roof, you're the owner of the smaller roof, you don't have any kind of opening. It's wide open to the larger rooftop, and therefore it's also for you to carry because you're open to a place that's also for you to carry. The same exact halacha, in the exact same case, would apply to down below in a chutzner. You have a wide chutzner that opens up into a narrower chutzner. Why did the Mishnah bring 2 cases? To tell us pshat in the first case. The rooftop has to be similar to a chutzner. So according to Rav says you don't invoke good asik unless you could discern the mechitza, you could see the mechitza. So over here also, the only time you make a good asik that the rooftop has walls is if you could see the side of the building. For instance, the wall that divides the 2 roofs, the 2 houses below, you don't see, and therefore there is no good asik according to Rav. But in this case, according to Shmuel, you do say good asik for the center wall that divides the 2 roofs. So why is it that the smaller roof cannot carry within the smaller roof? It has an imaginable mechitza, and the answer is because we're talking about like a chutzner. Just like a chutzner, people walk through the chutzner. So 2 people are walking from the smaller roof to the larger roof, from the narrow roof to the wider roof, and that ruins the good asik. There is no invisible mechitza since they're walking over it. Rabba, Reb Zera, Rabba Bar Chanan were sitting around and they were discussing this Mishnah in front of Abaya. And they said, from this idea that the larger rooftop and the larger chutzner, they dominate the smaller one, we can learn numerous halachas from this. 5 different halachas. The first halacha is klaya kerem, and that is you cannot plant vegetables together with a vineyard. But what if you have a larger field leading into a smaller field? Well, it depends. If the vineyard is in the larger field, it rules over the smaller field, and typically all you need to do is distance yourself 4 amas from the vineyard and you can plant. But in this case, you cannot. Since if you plant in the smaller field, it's as if the smaller field is in the larger field, because the larger field brings the smaller field to it, and therefore it's usher to plant it. What happens if you went ahead and you planted anyway? The vineyard is mutter, and all the vegetables are usher. Now, what about the reverse? If the vineyard is in the smaller field, the narrower field, and the larger field you want to plant, so it's mutter to plant in the larger field, because at this time we view the indentation between the larger field, the wider field, the narrow field, as a mechitza, as if it's closed off. Second halacha would be regarding a woman and a get. If the woman she's the one that has to control the situation, and therefore if she's in the larger field and the husband puts the get in the smaller field, she's divorced. But if it's the reverse, she's in the small, because then she rules, she brings the get to herself, but in the reverse, she's not megurish. Third case would be if a shliach tzibur is in the smaller field, or number 10 to the minyan is in the smaller field, and the roiv, the 9 people are in the larger field, they bring the shliach tzibur and the 10th person to them, and they have a minyan in their yaitza. Same thing would apply. If there's feces, soya, in the larger one, then it's also to say Kriya Shema in the smaller one, because then it's as if the feces brought that person to him. Abaye says we don't find that a mechitza can make an isser. He overheard this and he says, doesn't make sense. Typically mechitza separates and divides. Over here he's saying because it's a mechitza, even though you're more than 4 amas away from the vineyard, you're creating an isser. Says Reb Zera, but what about the case where you have a wide field and a small field, or a wide rooftop and a narrow rooftop? We said that the people in the wider rooftop or the wider field could carry, and the smaller one doesn't answer. Now, if you get rid of that indentation, like you see with the blue line, you build a new wall, then it becomes also for you to carry, because now you're open to a place that's awesome. So you see, making a new wall makes it also for you. Says the Gemara, no. What you're doing is you're not making a new wall. You're getting rid of the red by creating the blue. And that's different. Have a wonderful day.